So, you're curious about Bitcoin, right? But maybe it all seems, well, a little complicated? Well, you've definitely come to the right place. We're going to break down the core concepts of Bitcoin using the fantastic book Mastering Bitcoin by Andreas Antonopoulos as our guide. Let's get into the big ideas straight from the source.
All right, let's just jump right in, but with a question that I bet you were not expecting. What in the world do leafcutter ants have to do with money? And yeah, I know it sounds a little weird, but believe it or not, when we're talking about Bitcoin, this analogy is, well, it's everything. The author of Mastering Bitcoin uses this exact idea to explain the technology's most profound insight.
You know, the author himself, he first just brushed Bitcoin off as nerd money, but then he actually read Satoshi Nakamoto's original white paper and it was like, boom, a light bulb went off. He realized, and this is the quote that changes everything, this isn't money, it's a decentralized trust network. And honestly, if you can get your head around that one idea, you're most of the way there.
So what does that even mean? Well, think about an ant colony. It's this incredible complex system, right? But there's no CEO ant, no queen giving out commands. The whole thing just works because every single ant is following a few simple rules. And that's Bitcoin in a nutshell. It's this massive, resilient network where a bunch of computers, or nodes, are all following some pretty simple math rules. And together, with no one in charge, they create something amazing.
Okay, so to really get why this decentralized trust thing is such a huge deal, we need to look at the one massive problem it was built to solve.
And here it is, the big challenge for any kind of digital money. Let's say I have a digital file, like an MP3, but it represents $1. What stops me from just copy-pasting it and spending that same digital dollar in two different places at the same time? That right there, that's the infamous double spend problem.
For years, I mean decades, the only answer we had was a middleman, a central authority. Think about your bank, or PayPal, or Visa. They keep a big private ledger. They're the ones we trust to check our balance and make sure we don't spend money we don't have, or spend the same money twice. But what Bitcoin did, for the very first time in history, was figure out how to solve this problem without needing that middleman. That's the game changer.
So, how on earth did Satoshi Nakamoto pull this off? Well, it wasn't some brand new magical invention. It was actually a really clever combination of 4 technologies that already existed. He just wove them together in this completely new and brilliant way. It really boils down to these 4 key ingredients. First, you've got a peer-to-peer network, kind of like BitTorrent, where there's no main server. Second, a public record of every single transaction. That's the famous blockchain. Third, a system for creating new coins, which we call mining. And finally, a way for everyone on the network to agree on which transactions are valid. You put those 4 things together, and that's how you get this network of trust.
So, what is this blockchain thing everyone talks about? Just think of it like a giant, public notebook that everyone on the network shares and can see. Transactions get bundled together into blocks, and each new block gets cryptographically locked onto the one before it, creating this unbreakable chain that goes all the way back to the very first transaction. It's a completely transparent, unchangeable record of everything.
Okay, that's a lot of theory, I know, so let's make it real. We're going to follow the story of Alice from the book and see exactly what it's like to get and use your very first Bitcoin.
First things first, Alice needs a wallet. This is just a piece of software that's going to be her personal gateway to the Bitcoin network. In this case, she downloads one called Multibit. This is what will hold her private keys, the secret sauce that lets her spend her Bitcoin and let her send and receive funds. The second she fires up that wallet, boom, it automatically creates her very first Bitcoin address. You can see it there, that crazy long string of letters and numbers. The best way to think about it is like an email address, but for money. She can give this address to anyone in the world and they can send Bitcoin right to her wallet. It's that simple.
So where does she get the Bitcoin? Well, yeah, there are online exchanges, but honestly, one of the simplest ways is just to get some from a friend. So Alice meets up with Joe, the guy who got her interested in this stuff, to buy $10 worth.
All right, so first things first, they need to figure out a fair price. Bitcoin's price, it fluctuates. So Joe just pulls out his phone, opens up an app, and checks the current live exchange rate. That way, they both know they're getting a fair deal.
Now for the actual magic. Alice pulls up a QR code on her wallet. Now, instead of Joe having to type in that super long, complicated address and probably making a mistake, he just opens his wallet, scans the code with his phone's camera, types in the amount, 0.10 Bitcoin,
and just hit send.
And this is the part that just blows your mind the first time you see it. We're talking less than a second. Joe's transaction gets broadcast from his phone and just ripples across the entire global network of Bitcoin computers. Alice looks at her wallet, and she can see the payment coming in almost instantly. There's no bank, no 3-day waiting period, none of that. It's just a direct, person-to-person transfer of value.
Okay, so buying a little Bitcoin from a friend is a pretty simple but really powerful example of how this works. But the real implications of this technology, they are so much bigger. This is what people mean when they talk about the Internet of Money. And what's so critical to understand is that what Bitcoin really solved goes way beyond just digital cash. It actually cracked a famous old problem in computer science about how you get a group of disconnected parties to all agree on a single truth. And once you can do that, once you have a shared source of truth without a boss, man, the doors fly open for all kinds of things. Think about totally transparent elections, unforgeable property records, digital documents that can be notarized without a lawyer. The list goes on.
And that really brings us right back to where we started. See, Bitcoin isn't really just a new currency. It's a new kind of trust. It's a system where trust isn't based on a big institution or a government, but on open source code and pure mathematics. And that leaves us with this one huge, fascinating question to chew on. If we have this new tool for creating trust, what can we build with it?